Good morning, my name is George. We're today on the Little Rock Air Force Base where I have a project that's due at the end of the week. It's an American flag slash Chiefs Mess in the Coast Guard flag coin rack made out of wood. What we're going to do today is we're going to use some leftover 2x. This is from another project that one of the classes that we did on base here. And we have a laser engraver and a CNC here, so there's a number of ways we can do this, but I did go ahead and stain this with a blue water-based stain. And then I took it over to Rockin' Graphics where they actually engraved the stars. All my wood is going to be, all the light colored wood, or the whites of the flag, are going to be that pine colors to keep that rustic look. So because we're going to have some exposed pine, I really feel like I need to treat it with something. So I will be, after all said and done and everything's dried, hit it with this polyurethane. Now as for the water-based tints, I used two different ones. Obviously we got the blue and the red for the red stripes. The big thing is this is a tenable stain, so when you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, you can locate these water-based stains and they can actually tint them for you to whatever color you want. And again, you can kind of see that's the name of it, Minwax water-based wood stain. It's a clear tint base. You're also going to need some good glue. I prefer to use Titebond 3. It's a waterproof glue. Now I will say that these run you about, I don't know, $8-9 a piece, maybe even all the way up to $10 after taxes, depending on where you live. And a whole gallon of the stuff is going to run you about $28. So if you got a lot of these projects, or if you're getting into cutting boards, I highly suggest you go ahead and get you a gallon of glue. You can also use leftover soap, the dishwashing soap containers that you have around your house. You can use those to fill up with this glue as well to give you a more exact. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in, because we're going to be using quite a bit of glue today. Not as much as the cutting boards, but it is a significant amount. All right, so after we got all our pieces together, the next step is to actually go ahead and start cutting our strips. Now the reason that I use a 2x is that the width is already at 1.5. So you got a 1.5 inch, and that's really what you need when you're creating a 3-foot long wooden rustic flag. There's actually some websites out there where you can put your calculations in of how big you want your overall flag, and it'll tell you the size of the strips you want, because you really want to obey that flag code. So with that said, you can pick up your 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, however you want, and then you'll actually cut the strips. I cut them easily about 3/4. And what you'll see here is I'm actually doing a 3/4 inch cut on the table saw for my slats. As I talked about before, the great thing about using a 2x is that it already has that 1.5 inches of thickness you need. So whenever you cut it at 3/4 of an inch, you can lay it down. Good part about using the 3/4 inch standard is that if you use a piece of 3/4 inch board that you have, either plywood or whatever you want to use for the stars, you have that 3/4 inch thickness from making the slats 3/4 of an inch thick. For the coin portion of it, I actually used a 1.5 inch standard. What that did was it gave me the 3/4 of an inch overhang for me to put my coin slots. Okay, so for this particular one, like I said, it's going to be a two-tone, so it's not just a straight American flag. So this area over in here is going to actually be black and have a seal engraved. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave this coin rack full, this coin rack full, and this one right here. I'm just going to kind of cut it probably somewhere right around in here and cut it down to the same thickness as this. And what that'll allow me to do is really give a nice engraving on this black area right here. So we'll try it, we'll see how it looks. If nothing else, I'm going to burn the area before it's engraved. So let's try that, we'll see what happens once I get that piece cut down to the same size here. But I will leave this so that the coins will have you have a little bit more coin rack to put stuff on there. Okay, so what I've done here is now we're making the slots for the coin rack. The blade width is approximately 1/8 of an inch thick. I make 2 passes to give it 1/4 of an inch pass, maybe just a little bit more for some of the bigger coins, but it'll fit. I mean, most of the coins that you get today, they should fit unless they're lacquered on the outsides. In that case, you'll want to make a bigger slot. But right here, what I've done is I've given it about probably about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. Okay, so I got some 220 sandpaper and some 120. I'm gonna knock the edges off of everything, get some of this saw blade gouges out of it, any kind of writing that I might have on here. Obviously, I'm not gonna sign the blue stars. Just going to sand all the wood so we can get it nice and smooth and get it prepped for staining. Alright, so now we get to this point where we sanded everything down, we've got everything laid out like we want. This is where I'll usually split it into 3 different sections. So I'll split the field by itself, I'll take the short stripes by themselves, and then separate the bottom into themselves. What I'll do here is I'll go ahead and stain all the pieces that need to be stained, and then I'll glue these sections together. Then when I put them all together, I'll only have 3 different sections. So I'll have this section here, this section here, and this section here to merge together and glue up. And whether I decide to do strips on the back, or if I decide to do a piece of Luan in the back to have something easier to nail into on the back side. So yeah, so now what we're going to do is we're going to separate them into the ones that need to be stained. Alright, so now we're going to take them, we have our 3 sections like I said before, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the stripes that I'm going to stain red. So, red, white, red, white, red, white, red, white, over to the other table and I'll show you how to stain these real quick. Alright, so what we have here is we got scarlet red. Real nice color. I'm just going to stir it up a little bit, making a little mess. It's alright. I like to keep paste wax on my tables so that everything just kind of pops right off whenever I get done. It's time to clean them up. Alright, so all these got to be done. You can take a brush, brush them off, wipe them off, however you want to do it. I'm just going to take a rag because it doesn't have to be perfect, and go ahead and start staining these. And this red water-based stain is called Scarlet. That's the tint. So if you want the exact same color, you can always go up there and get the water-based stain clear and ask them to make it scarlet. So I like to make sure I get the edges a little bit, not too terribly much, but some. Alright. And we'll just do that to all of them. Now, if you were looking for, you know, you see a lot of these rustic flags with the stripes of burnt or blackened. You see a lot of these whenever it comes towards the police officer blue stripe, or you'll see more black flags carrying those than just the regular American flag. That's simply because it kind of stands out a little better. So, you know, if you decide that you wanted to go with a black, you could do that as well. You could even use an ebony stain. So what really, it's just all about customer preference or your own preference, or however you want to do it. So yeah, just kind of keep doing that. As you can see, it don't take very long. Just whack this on here real quick. It probably would have been a little bit easier if I had a brush, but I didn't really want to take a whole lot of time finding one either, so this is what we get. But after we get done putting this red stain on all these boards, we'll actually go back and wipe some of this stuff off, just so it'll help with even though it's water-based, it helps with keeping things even and drying times, and you know, it won't be as splotchy if you go ahead and wipe some of this stuff off after you get it on there. Need to get through to the good parts. It won't hurt my feelings if you fast forward. So what I do is I'll just kind of come back, wipe some of the excess off. Don't worry about the underneath. It's going to be covered anyway. You know, you're just not going to see it. If you have any spots that you don't like, maybe had something get on it, just go ahead and hit it with a little bit more stain and then rub it off. Slide to the next one. You can see how quickly this goes. Like I said, it allows for you to put a little bit more stain on if you like in certain little spots here and there. But as you can see, the whole process is pretty quick and painless. So by the end of the day, I will be able to have everything glued up, or at least have my sections glued up, so that way when I come in tomorrow, I can just go ahead and finish it all up by gluing everything together. That's pretty much it. Any little spots you see, like I said, just hit it a little more. But if you let it sit for too long, you will kind of pull that red off a little bit. So be careful how much pressure you do and whatnot. But that's the red part of our flag. And we'll let that dry a little bit. It's water-based, like I said, so it won't take long. I'll probably give it about 20 minutes just because. And then we will start gluing our two sections together. And then maybe by the end of the day we can actually go ahead and glue the whole flag together, so that would be nice. So anyway, so that's where we're at now, and just a little bit I'll come back and we'll glue these pieces together. Now, one thing I did forget to mention is that we when you do these flags, not all of them will require the ends to be stained on both ends, but some of them do. So the long ones, you definitely got to hit on both sides. The short ones, you can just pick one side. Just make sure you're okay with that one being the one, because these are going to be exposed, and you want to make sure that your flag has red on the ends. Otherwise, it won't have that finished look. So. Don't want to try this after you've got it all glued together, because then you run the risk of the stain bleeds onto the other pieces, your white pieces, and then it's just a mess. So I definitely suggest getting it straightened out before then. You can stain both sides, but you don't have to on the short ones. I mean. Especially this would be prudent to stain both if you're unaware. The other thing is you do need to stain the one side, one length side, for the top of the flag. So I'll just go ahead and do this one. This will be my top, and this one will be my bottom. And I'll stain the bottom edge of this one, as you can see. That way the flag is red through and through, and you don't have to worry about having any old pieces not looking correct. That's pretty much it. Yep, we'll go ahead and let this stuff dry and come back in just a little bit and see what we got, where we're at, and if we can go ahead and start gluing it up. Thanks. Alright, so we still have the non-stained or the white stripes of the flag, so I'll get the red ones. We'll start at the top, just kind of work our way down. Remember, the stain is already dried. That's the good part about using a water-based stain, is that it does dry fairly quick. And that's pretty much it. Now we'll go ahead and start the clamping process and get this section and this section glued up. All I'm going to do is flip them up, apply a bead of glue, smooth it out, try to keep it more on the downs portion as opposed to the top portion so I don't get much on the stain. Once I get everything all set, then I'll take these and I'll show you with what they look like all glued down. So, all right, so that's pretty much it. Okay, so I went ahead and let these dry overnight. Just gonna take these clamps off of them. Now, even though I treat my tables with a paste wax to keep everything from being glued down to the table, I decided to go back yesterday and lift up the clamps and put down some of this Teflon paper. That way, I would make sure there wasn't any real issues with it sticking to the table, or some of my wax had disappeared or whatever. So, a lot of people use wax paper. I use these Teflon sheets just because they're reusable, and I only need like 4 of them. They lasted me a year. All right, as you can see, we got 3 different ones. These are the 3 panels I talked about yesterday. So now we can take them and kind of set them up, take a look at them. So there we go. We got 3 panels. Now what you can do is you can actually come in here and make a decision on what you want to, or how you want to do it. Well, I'm going to do this one is I'm probably going to take a piece of plywood, just a little bit shorter than the back side. That way it's easier for me to attach it. I'll throw some glue on it and everything from the back side so it's nice and cleaned up in the back. And it's got a good place for me to put my screws and whatnot. And it's going to be solid because, you know, all these pieces. Now what you can do as well is you can create slats. Sometimes people will take slats on the back side and they'll connect these two, and they'll connect this one to here, and then they'll put a little one across here, so everything's kind of connected. All right, so we'll get some plywood to adhere to the back, and then we'll go ahead and get the flame out and burn it. All right, so I cut my piece of plywood out, some scrap I had laying around. We get pallets and stuff sometimes that have boxes that are put in 1/4-inch plywood, and I just like to use that for things that'll be out of sight. So I'm just going to size it up real quick, make sure that it's not too big, and everything will fit on it. Everything looks pretty good. So yeah, just make sure everything's covered. Now that plywood is sticking out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my wood is 3/4 of an inch, the plywood's roughly 1/4 of an inch. That gives me an inch. So I'm probably going to use a 1/2 inch brad nail and glue on the back. The brads will keep it in place so that glue dries and it'll be nice and solid. So we'll do that real quick. Alright, so as you can see, we got everything brad nailed down. It's glued, it's solid. We'll have a nice good anchor point for the hooks in the back to put the copper wiring to hang it up on the wall. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the torch. I'm going to burn a line in this area right here. There might be some discoloration between the white and red lines, but we'll have the engraving right there. So this is the torch I use. Pretty simple, you know, automatic lighting. Just pull the trigger and it lights up. Pretty standard stuff. So we'll go ahead and burn it now. And as you can see, the burn came out pretty good. There's a couple spots, there were some knots right up in here where sap was, so whenever I hit it with the torch, it just kind of bubbles. I'm not going to burn it to a crisp, so just wanted to get this area darkened so that we can put that seal engraved right here. Well, and this is the finished product. As you can see, we burn everything in with the laser engraver. It took away some of that burn, and this is particular ones for a BMC in the Coast Guard, and should be receiving it in the next couple of days if he hasn't already. You can see the grain still showing through on the dyes. If you use a paint, you don't really see that wood grain. You kind of lose that, but the painted flags look just as good. It does make it a little easier to put those stars on there if you paint them white. If it has a nice flat glossy blue paint on it versus the stain, just gives a nice place for the tape to adhere to, and you don't have much bleed out when you paint the blue fill with paint versus stain. But other than that, this is the finished product. I hope you liked the video. If you do, let me know down below. And other than that, have a great day.